Donald Trump has surged in the latest 2024 election polling and has actually taken the lead in the states of Minnesota and Virginia, two states that Biden won handily by margins of 7 and 10 points in the 2020 election. And so in this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map based on the Hill's latest polling averages and see the impact of these new changes. Starting off in Washington and Oregon, we don't have any polling averages from the Hill yet from these two states, but they are pretty solid Democratic states. I wouldn't be surprised if the margin went down to likely in one of these states in this election, but generally they're pretty safe for Democrats. California, though, we do have a polling average. Biden leads by 24 points in the Golden State. He's been ahead throughout the election, although Trump is doing better and better, and this 24% lead is still significantly less than his 30-point victory in the 2020 election, so California will be a solid blue state. Moving on to Nevada and Arizona, our first two competitive races. The Silver State is going to be very competitive this year. Joe Biden might have won it by 2 points in 2020, but that was the same margin that Hillary Clinton won it by in 2016, and of course Clinton's performance throughout the entire map was pretty poor. The last time a Republican won Nevada was George W. Bush in 2004, and Donald Trump really could become the next Republican to win it. If you look at the latest polling from the state, Trump actually leads by just over 3 points. He's been ahead since October of last year. Biden was polling pretty well in the summer of 2023, but as we went into the fall and the winter, Trump has taken a lead that Biden hasn't been able to recover from. If you look at the polling, you basically see a sea of red, Trump leading in virtually every single poll from the state. I mean, just keep scrolling down. It's all Trump leading. We have some polls that show a tie. One poll recently that had Biden up by 4, but that was the only one in a very long time to show that. So Nevada undoubtedly is currently favoring Donald Trump. We're going to see what happens in the end, but right now it is very much in the Republican column, and currently on this map, it is a lean Trump state. Down in Arizona, we're seeing something pretty similar here. Biden was actually able to win the state by 0.3%. He was the first Democrat to carry Arizona since Bill Clinton back in 1996. However, Biden is on track now to lose the state as he's behind in Arizona, just like in Nevada, this time by 4.6%. And again, Biden was actually leading until the end of 2023, where Trump took a lead that Biden hasn't been able to recover from. And if you look at the polling, I mean, again, a sea of red. Trump leads in every single poll out of Arizona. I'm basically going all the way back to the beginning of this year. So Biden really doesn't have a chance here, and at least as of right now, Arizona is a pretty solid lean Republican state. Now moving on to Colorado, 10 electoral votes that Biden won easily in the last election by a solid 14-point margin. Today, Biden only leads by 7 points in the polling, and it's pretty consistent. If you look at the most recent numbers, I mean, the latest poll shows Biden ahead by just 6 points. Clearly, he's not going to win this state by a double-digit margin, and this is reflective of Biden's nationwide trend downward when compared to the 2020 polling and results, and so Colorado is barely even going to be a likely blue state. New Mexico is probably going to vote similarly to Colorado, so just to be nice to Biden, we're going to place it in likely and not lean. While for Donald Trump, he is on track to winning virtually every single state here in the middle of the country. They are not going to be close. The 2nd district of Nebraska right now, polling is favoring Biden. He did win this district by 7 points in 2020. I think it can definitely go down to the wire. Trump can definitely win it back. But for right now, the numbers do favor Biden ever so slightly. And so moving down to the Lone Star State of Texas, 40 electoral votes. This is going to be a pretty big prize for Donald Trump. He leads by 9 points in the state, very similar to his 2016 victory when he was able to carry it by that 9-point margin. In 2020, though, it went down to 5.6. Really not that great of a performance if you consider Mitt Romney even won Texas by 16 points in 2012. But today, Trump is performing very well here, leading with 50% of the vote. So Texas is going to be likely Republican. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. Moving down to Alaska and Hawaii, both of these states are going to be pretty solid for their respective parties. Alaska always been a red state. Hawaii has been blue for a very long time. So both of these states will not be too competitive, although there's talk that Hawaii could get very close, which is definitely possible considering Biden's very poor handling of the Maui fires. He basically left them out to dry, but Hawaii is still a state that Biden won by 30 points in the last election. I think that can go down to around 20, but it's still going to be a blue state. Hawaii has been very liberal for a very long time. Now, moving up to the Midwest, this is where a lot of the key states are going to come into play. And we're going to start off with Minnesota, 10 electoral votes. This is a big one because Donald Trump is now leading in the state by 1.6%, the first time he's led in Minnesota in the polling average ever over Joe Biden. If you looked at the most recent polling, Trump is ahead. We have one from McLaughlin from June and another one from them back in May. And even the polls that Biden's leading in, I mean, he's leading in by 2 and 3 points. I mean, this is within the margin of error. So really, anyone could win Minnesota. And Donald Trump has a history of doing well in this state. He came within 2 points of defeating Clinton in 2016. And of course, the Rust Belt as a whole has been shifting to the right, and that's been happening for a very long time now. And so Minnesota flipping would be a pretty big deal because no Republican has won the state going all the way back to 1972 and the election of Richard Nixon. So Minnesota right now is going to be lean Republican. Iowa, on the other hand, though, is going to be slightly more solid, although according to the polling average, Trump isn't really doing all that well, although if we do know that he's going to win by at least 10 points in the state, but the polling average from the Hill tends to really overweigh the most recent poll. So as of right now, according to the average, Trump leads by 3.1, but the margin here is going to be pretty similar to Ohio, and we'll take a look at Ohio in just a few moments. And to get out Illinois and Indiana, Indiana's going to be solid red. Illinois could go into the likely range, but it's still a pretty safe blue state that Biden's going to win. Now moving on to Wisconsin, Biden leads by 1.3% actually. Trump has led throughout almost the entirety of the cycle so far, but very recently there was one poll that showed Biden ahead by 2, and that's basically what put him over. The polling in Wisconsin has been known to severely overestimate Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Biden was supposed to win the state by 7 points. He eventually only won it by 0.63. That's actually a smaller margin than Trump won the state by in 2016. So Donald Trump is definitely still in the running to win Wisconsin. There's no doubt about that. The former president, I would say, is still favored here, especially if you look at the polling from some of its neighboring states, which are typically more liberal than Wisconsin. If we move over to Michigan, 15 electoral votes, this tends to be the most liberal out of the 3 states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the 3 blue wall states. Even though the blue wall was taken down by Trump in 2016, Michigan was the closest in 2016, and Biden won Michigan by the largest margin in 2020. So looking at the polling in the Wolverine state, Donald Trump currently leads by 0.5%, and he's been ahead since October of last year. Michigan, just like Wisconsin, really overestimated Biden in the polling in 2020, and if you look at the numbers as a whole, it's a lot of red. We see some sprinkles of blue there, but Trump leads in an overwhelming majority of the polling in Michigan, something he never did in 2020, and he still came pretty close to actually winning the state. So right now, Michigan is going to be tilt for the GOP with that 0.5% lead. And to finish off the Midwest, we still have Ohio and the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. Starting off in the Buckeye State, Donald Trump leads by 8.4% in Ohio. This is what we're going to see in Iowa, although even this is a pretty small margin. If you go to 538 or Real Clear Politics, Trump is leading by a solid 12-point margin. This is mainly a result of that most recent poll showing Trump ahead by just 8 points. So Ohio is going to be likely Republican, although it could fall anywhere between that likely to solid range this November. And finally, in Pennsylvania, this is Joe Biden's birth state. I mean, this is a state that he really has to win. Joe Biden will have a very hard time winning the presidency without the 19 electoral votes that Pennsylvania would give him. And so when looking at the data right now, Donald Trump is actually performing better in Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden was born, than both Wisconsin and Michigan. Trump currently has a 1.7% lead. And if you look at the polling, I mean, it's virtually all red. Only one poll anytime recently has shown Biden to be ahead. So the state of Pennsylvania is going to be lean Republican. And so when looking at the Midwest as a whole, we see a lot of red, just that very small patch of blue in the middle there, very similar to what we saw in 2016 when Trump was able to win the election. Up in the Midwest, this is a pretty solid Biden region as a whole. Now, just to be safe, we're going to give New York and New Jersey to Joe Biden as solid blue states. Obviously, if you look at the polling, it's more around 7 to 10 points right now, but these are still regions that Biden's guaranteed to win. It would be very surprising if Trump actually won them. So just for right now, for this map, because we're not polling averages in them, we are going to fill many of these states just as solid blue so that we don't waste too much time on them. New Hampshire, though, is a state that we do have to talk about. As of right now, Joe Biden only holds a 3.7% lead based on the latest 10 polls. Biden is still leading in the state, but I mean, his margins just continue to go down like they are nationally. New Hampshire is becoming competitive once again. I mean, if you look at the polling prior to this, Biden was leading by 10 points in just October of last year. That is no longer the case. He's now only up by 3.7, and just like Minnesota, New Hampshire is a state that Trump can win. In 2016, he came within half a percentage point of defeating Hillary Clinton. New Hampshire was not expected to be close, and so this should be very worrying news for the Biden campaign that he's barely leading in the state now, a state that he won by 7 points in the last election. So New Hampshire is going to be lean blue, while for the state of Maine, Trump is performing very well in the state, but it is still a state that's been historically Democratic, and so for right now, we're just going to place the state into the lean Democratic column, although there definitely is a very good chance that Trump can actually win it. Now, moving down to the south, this is where we're going to finish our map. A lot of electoral votes left for Donald Trump from these deep southern red states. These are all going to be very solid for the former president. There's no doubt that he's going to crush Joe Biden in this region. And even in states like Virginia now, too, it seems that Donald Trump has taken the lead in the entire southern region of the United States. So looking at the polling from Virginia, Trump 43.9, Biden 43.7. It is a small lead, but I mean, look at this polling average over the last year. I mean, Biden leads by 12 points when the election cycle really first starts to kick off. I mean, it goes down, but then Biden still maintains around a 4 or 5 point lead for most of the winter, but now he's totally lost it. Donald Trump is the favored candidate in Virginia now. We have a poll that shows him leading. The 3 latest polls conducted by 3 separate pollsters all show a tie in a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points in the last election. That's how far he's fallen. So Virginia now is going to be tilt for the GOP for the very first time. North Carolina, though, Trump is performing significantly better in. This state came down to a 1-point margin in 2020. Trump did come out on top, and this was a state that Biden was supposed to win if you just look at the polling from 2020. And as of right now, Trump leads by 5.4%. Nothing really too much to talk about here. It's going to be a rather competitive state, but Trump is going to come out on top. The Tar Heel state is currently likely red. And to finish off the map with Georgia and Florida, 46 electoral votes combined between the two states. Now, Georgia was actually a blue state in 2020. Biden flipped it, becoming the first Democrat to win it since Bill Clinton in 1992. He won it by 0.24%. It was the closest state of the entire election. If there's any state Biden's going to lose, Georgia is first in line, and that's exactly what the polls are telling us. Trump leads by 4.4% in the state. He's actually been leading since June of last year, so it's been a year. Trump's been ahead this whole time. He's not going to lose the state, especially considering that the polls actually did have Biden winning Georgia in the last election. Polling in Georgia has actually been very accurate over the last few election cycles, whether it's Senate, governor, or presidential races. So if there's any state where the polling is something that you might trust at least a little bit, it is probably going to be the state of Georgia. And I mean, Trump leads in virtually every single poll. The New York Times actually had the former president up by 10 points in a poll just last month. So the Peach State will fall within the lean Republican category, although we all know it is not going to be very competitive at all. Biden should not be wasting time on this state. And finally, in Florida, 30 electoral votes, the Sunshine State. This used to be very competitive. I mean, just look at the previous results. 2016, Trump barely won it. 2012, Obama barely won it. Even in 2008, it was very, very close. John McCain lost Missouri, or almost lost Missouri, but he still somehow was able to get very close in Florida. In 2004, Bush won by 5, but 2000, the margin was 0.09. So Florida has been one of the most competitive states in the country for a very long time now, but that is no longer the case. Florida is now a pretty red state. I mean, on par with states like Ohio, Iowa, and Texas. That's how red it's gotten. And I mean, looking at the polling, Trump leads by 6.3% if you go to Real Clear Politics, or 538, that leads 9, 10, sometimes even 12%. So the Hill definitely favors the most recent poll a little bit too much, as you can see, +4 for Trump in that most recent one, but a poll right before it had Trump leading by 10. So Florida, by no means, is going to be competitive this cycle. It is going to go to Donald Trump, and that's an easy 30 electoral votes for the former president. And so right now, based on the Hill's latest polling averages, with Trump having flipped both Minnesota and Virginia, if he gets Wisconsin, his number will go up even higher. But as of right now, Donald Trump is expected to win 325 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 213, which means that Trump is on track to easily win his re-election this November. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like this video down below if you enjoyed it, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election, and comment down below who you think is going to win the 2024 election.